Following the story of Jacob in the Bible, and we've been looking at this from a standpoint of mystically evaluating the Bible on a spiritual basis, to the point of not accepting the fact that these people even existed. Because if they existed, then it becomes silliness and stories of people thousands of years ago that have no bearing on your life. But on the other hand, if we take and understand them as parts of your mind, part of your being, each one representing a different part. Now, you just can't do this on the basis of saying, well, I think that's what it means. If you have an opportunity, maybe at another time, you can look at the Bible in Galatians chapter 4, verse 24. It says these things are allegorical. It says in Psalm 78:2 that God speaks in dark sayings, hidden meanings. It says in Proverbs 1:6 that wisdom is understanding these hidden meanings, dark sayings. These are allegorical writings of Eastern people from thousands of years ago, and this is the way they wrote. And they wrote to deliberately hide things from the profane, and they become apparent to you when you begin to meditate, when you begin to understand. You know, it always is a wonder to me that the people that will attack what I'm doing here are the same people who will sit down with a Bible and honestly believe that there were two Englishmen running around, an Englishman named Adam and an English lady named Eve with no clothes on, stark naked, and didn't realize that they were naked until they were told by a talking snake. And this is the basis of their religion, you know. How do you know you don't have any clothes on? A talking snake told me. Sounds all right to me. Hallelujah. Praise God for that. You know, and it's so bizarre. If you start looking at these things and start to try to understand things this way, you miss. What we had here in Jacob was a situation of all of us, each one of us, as we evolve away from that which is the conflicts with our nature, the conflicts with our mind, the conflicts with the system, the conflict with ourselves. He developed this. He was at a point in the early part of his evolution in which, okay, everything's okay. I got a pretty nice house, you know, and I got a pretty nice car, and, you know, yeah, I got a decent job, you know, and I go away once in a while. I got a couple of kids and everything, but I am miserable. In spite of all of this stuff, I am miserable because there's never enough of that to make us feel like, you know, we have fulfilled ourselves. And that's why you feel the way you do, because it's true, you haven't fulfilled yourself. Most people have no idea. And since there's some new people here today, we'll maybe do this little ritual that I go through as I ask you and I point and we say, let's see what things mean. How many of you know what this is? If you don't, it's a speaker for you know, music. And if you don't know what this is, maybe you'd better come back. Maybe that's a speaker. This is a decorative plant. This is a board to write things on. This is a wall. These are chimes. There's the lights. There's the ceiling. These are chairs. You know what the screws in the chairs are for? You know what everything. Look around the room. There's not one thing in this room that you can't say, I know what that's for. There's lights. There's walls. There's ceilings. There's beams. There's poles. There's things. Everything. Even the screws that go in to hold them together. I know what they're for. But now what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at the person sitting next to you. What the heck is that for? See? And that's the problem. And that's why we run into the same things that Jacob is described as running into in this book. Because we don't understand our purpose. We don't understand our reasoning. And he gets to a point where you get to this point where you've got everything, but he's got to somehow fulfill himself, because in the beginning he sees everything going to the physical side. And yet he's got a drain in the spiritual side. And in order to get attention to his spiritual side, he has to deceive his father, who is Isaac. And what that means is when you come into meditation, you'll sit there and your mind will drive you crazy. You'll be driven crazy by myriads of thoughts that will come in. You'll sit, and if you try to take no thought for 30 seconds, you'll find you can't do it. Thoughts will just bombard your head. And so then you'll come up with gimmicks. You'll come up with Om, or you'll come up with Nam Myoho Renge, or you'll come up with sounds from a speaker, or you put birds chirping on your ears, anything, because you're trying to deceive your mind. And then eventually you will deceive your mind to the point where your spirit will start to activate. Things will start to happen. The pineal gland of the brain will start to come alive. All of these things will start to happen in you because you're starting to function with that new part that you've long neglected. And that's where Jacob came. And then Jacob goes through all of these trials and tribulations, and this went wrong and that went right, and this went right and that went wrong. That's what all of us go through. There's a real serious problem when you look at a point of religion and Christianity, Judaism, and all the religions, a lot of the religions anyhow. They give you a goal, and they say you're going to try to get to heaven. The point is really, there never is a goal to be reached. All that you'll ever do through eternity is head in the right direction. You'll never get there. Because if you get there, then what? What are you going to do then? What's there to stimulate you? What is there to move ahead for? What is there to create? What is there to challenge? Your life for meditation is simply to go into that holy place and receive instructions as what to do with the mess that you're confronted with now. And once you overcome that mess, guess what? There's another mess. There's another mess. Oh, I've got this problem. And I've gone in, I've been meditating, and I was delivered out of this problem, and guess what happened? It all worked out, and everything's wonderful, and the phone rings. Oh my God. That's life. That's life, and that's why we live. But the point is understanding. Understanding that before we can take care of the problems that come against us and take care and help with the problems that come against other people, we've got to get to know ourselves. We've got to understand ourselves. We've got to overcome ourselves. You've got to overcome the thoughts that come against you because they constantly bombard you. And that's where this Jacob gets to that point where he came a couple of weeks ago. And on page 28, if you look in these little Bibles you got there, you'll see in Genesis chapter 32, after all of these storms, and I'm telling you, I am telling you, there is no counselor on the face of this earth that'll be able to straighten your life out or straighten your family's life out. None. All they can try to do is sort out a way that maybe you can move through this problem, but the basic problem is always going to be there until you cleanse it. Shakyamuni Buddha used to say, people will come up and say to another person, look, why did you have to stir all of this up? Yes, you. You know that I'm looking. Every time you come around, you stir up this stuff, and I get all mad. I'm not teasing. I get all mad because you're stirring this up. But you know what Shakyamuni Buddha said? It's not the person that's stirring anything up. If you didn't have the sediment in your cup, there'd be nothing to stir up. If you get the sediment cleaned out of the bottom of your cup, they can stir all they want. That water will never get dirty. So it's not the other person who's doing the stirring. It's something within you. They're triggering something within you. And that's why Buddha said, you've got to come to grips with that. You've got to come to grips with what's inside of yourself. It may be somebody in your family. They can't come to grips with a particular thing. It's because there's a sediment in there. And there's no human being that can take that sediment out. It has to be relieved only through that touch. And that touch is described so beautifully here. Here's Jacob. He is totally consumed with all of the problems, all of the trials and tribulations, all of the abrasions that life comes and brings a person. And it says in Genesis 32, it says he rose up at night, which means in verse 22 he went into the dark place. And in verse 23 he said he sent over everything that he had to the other side. Everything that he had. All of your desires. And it doesn't mean your desires to have nice things. It doesn't mean your desires to have a nice car. It doesn't mean, it means your desires of calling the shots as to how you're going to work this out. If you'll only understand, if you only knew what was inside of you, if you only knew what was inside of those near you, that within you, closer than your breath, is the solution to the problems of the universe. We have fought one another. We have killed one another. We have bombed one another. We have separated from one another. We have degraded women. We have brutalized animals. We have children that are just drugged all over the world. And what do we have? Religion's going to save us. There is a God, if there is a God somewhere that sits at a golden gate or a pearly gate, you know what he's going to do? As we go up there with our salvation, he's going to say, no, you go back and clean up that mess you made down there. And so we come to grips with this, which is the point of our salvation. We come into a meditation. I don't care where you do it. You could do it here. It's great because, you know, the energy. But you may want to do it home. That's fine too. You may do it in your car. You may do it on the john. You may do it wherever you do it. Come to grips with that which is alone. Send everything that you have. In other words, separate yourself from all of those desires, all of those cares, all of those things. It says, and he sent everything that he had in verse 23 over to the other side. And Jacob in verse 24 was left alone and there wrestled with a man until daybreak. You know who he was wrestling with? Himself. You know who you wrestle with? Yourself. The only enemy you have in this world is yourself. And it's an enemy. It'll taunt you. Even as you're sitting here watching me go through all these fancy oracles that I am espousing here on this Sunday morning, there is somebody talking to you right now, right? See, I know. Because it's talking to me too. I've got one side, I'm someplace else, I'm another side with you, and you're the same with me, because these things have the nature of things. They used to ask Buddha all of these difficult questions. They said, Shakyamuni, what about this? And he'd turn and he'd look and he'd say, such is the nature of things. It's things that you can't change because they're nature. But you have to understand how to live with them. And so it says he wrestled with a man until daybreak, which means he wrestled with himself until he became enlightened, until the light came on, until he began to understand. And that's what you do in meditation. You wrestle until finally the lights come on, and finally there's a way made for you through that problem. And then you're headed in the right direction. You're headed in the direction of saying, God, at least I'm going in the right direction. Constantly you go in the right direction because remember when the Jews crossed the Red Sea, which is nothing more than you separating and crossing over the emotions of your mind. When they crossed that Red Sea, what happened? They got ambushed here, they got ambushed there, they got ambushed everywhere. It never ends. They're still getting ambushed because you'll always be ambushed. Meditation is not going to change you to the point that things are not going to come against you. They are. What they're going to do is change you to the point that you'll know how to react against those things that come against you. See, the things will still come against you, but the way that you'll react to them will be different. And tell me I know. Joan and I, we used to go to John Birch meetings. We were a little to the right of Attila the Hun. I'm telling you, we used to bomb everybody, send the troops, and get rid of all the minorities. This is what we did. We went into meditation. I didn't ask to be changed like this, but in the meditation, something opened, and I became the Abby Hoffman of Fork and River. Ultra-leftist, liberal, and all. People spray paint on it. Why? Because the sun came out. The lights went on inside, and I was able to see. And this is the beautiful part. In the center of your brain, you have a gland called the pineal gland. The pineal gland of the brain. And when that energy raises itself up the spine, which is called kundalini, it hits the pineal gland of the brain. It throws open the right hemisphere of the brain, and summertime comes in the same way. Do you know where the sun is now in the sky? The sun that was born on December the 25th, it's moving upward and upward and upward. And you know what it's doing? It's closing in on the Lamb of God that takes away the cold of the winter. Aries. And the burnt offering will take place when the sun consumes the lamb. And then the sun in the northern hemisphere moves over to the eastern sky or the right side, and summertime comes to the earth. And everything that was dark and cold and barren in the winter will explode in new life. And do you know what happens when the sun, the solar plexus energy up the spine impacts the pineal gland of the brain? It opens the right hemisphere of the brain, and it sits at the right side, and summertime comes to your life. The cold, dark, gray winter of your soul gives way to that which is the spring, and new things are born. What new things are born? New ideas, new understanding, new ways to deal with these things that come against you. And that's the beautiful part of all this. And so what happens here? It says he sent everything to the other side. He wrestled with a man, and then in verse 25, the hollow of his thigh was put out. You know what? That's metaphysical. That's mysticism. The thigh is used as a symbol of the area of desire for obvious reasons. When the desire to do it his way was put out. When that happened, his name was changed, as it says there, from Jacob to Israel, which is not a Jewish name. It's Egyptian. 3 Egyptian goddesses, Isis, Ra, and El. The feminine spirit of Isis, the mind, Ra, and the power, El, which is the power which erupts within you. That's why you have the word angel, which is an inner power, and all the angels' names are ending in El, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Ariel, all this stuff. It's because that's the power within. So when your spirit comes to harmony with your mind, it produces the power within, you become Israel. And what did Jacob say 4,000 years ago? What did he say? I have seen God face to face. I've been delivered out of all this mess. I'll call the place. Look at Genesis chapter 32, right where you are. Look at verse 30. And Jacob called the name of the place Pineal. Huh? Do you know where that is? It's right here. It's not over there somewhere. It's right here. And you. Do you know that in the cults of Osiris, you know the word pineal means pine cone. And in the cults of Osiris in ancient Egypt, when they brought a dead body in to bury it, they would put a pine cone on the forehead. It's the pineal. You know what happens to a pine cone? You go out into the pine barrens here, the pine cone explodes when it's touched by fire, and seed spreads all over, and new life is created. And do you know what happens to the pine cone? When the energy of the solar plexus, the fire from that lower part, impacts on the pine cone, it explodes it, and it sends the seeds of new life throughout the mind. As it is without, so it is within. And so Jacob calls the name Pineal, for I have seen God face to face. And every time when that energy strikes that pineal, that's your experience with the thing you call God. And so this is your point now. This is the point too. Think of what problem you have. Think of what problem you have. Whatever it may be, it is certainly none of my business or anybody else's, but it's your business. What problem do you have? How can I get you to understand that the answer to that problem is within you? Jesus taught it, Buddha taught it, Krishna taught it, Muhammad taught it, Zoroaster taught it, Plato taught it, Pythagoras taught it. These are pretty brilliant people. René Descartes taught it. René Descartes said he was the father of philosophy. He said the point in the human being where God and physical meet is the pineal gland of the brain. How do I convince you? Because you say, oh, well, Bill Donahue, he's not a cellar in Fork and River. What the hell does he know? That's true. But I have got pretty good people that I'm quoting. And I'm trying simply to say to you, if you will touch that, the fire will open, the cone will explode, and the seeds of new understanding will come. But you've got to be willing to do it. And so then you reach this point, and we're at page 200, we're at page 30. And in Genesis chapter 35, God says to Jacob, okay, pal, you made it. Go to Bethel. You know what that is? That's the house of God. You can rise up now. Now you know where you should be. Sure, you got to go to Atlantic City. I do. You want to see the show. You want to go to New York, see a show. You want to go out. I do. Yeah? You want to go to a ball game. You want to watch TV. You want to do all of these things. They're all part of the physical part of you, and that's wonderful. But you've got to have balance. There's got to be times, once you find the key to this, that you've got to go to Bethel. You've got to spend time over at God's house. You'll spend time at her house. You'll spend time at his house. You'll spend time at everybody's house. This is the way you spend time at God's house. And you don't have to go out of your physical house to spend time at God's house. Because everywhere you go, it's God's house. But you got to spend time there. So he says, go to Bethel. See? Go to Bethel. Here's this point where you have overcome. What have you overcome? You've overcome yourself. Now the point is the trouble still happens. You know, you ever see those bumper stickers, this happens? You know, it always happens. But there's a difference. You now know where to go to get relief. You now know where to go to get instruction. And I will guarantee you this, if you will go and spend time at that house that is within yourself, this thing will come out right. It always comes out right. It has to come out right. It will never, ever fail. And it is the only way on the face of the earth to correct problem. Because the wisdom, the understanding, the enlightenment comes from cells at the right hemisphere of the brain. That is why the sun sits at the right side in the universe and summer comes. It's all new. What can the tree do? Nothing. What can the rose do? Nothing. What must it do? It must wait for God. It must wait for nature. It must wait. That's all it has to do. But look at your trees, folks. Take a look at your trees as you come out or go into your house. There's something happening at the end of the sticks of each of the branches. Things are starting to come alive. new ideas, new thoughts, new ways. And you know, this is the good part from a religious standpoint. It doesn't cost you a penny. You don't have to join anything. You don't have to go anywhere. It's a confrontation first with you on the left side, and then it is a meeting in that holy place between you and God. So you go to Bethel. Why do you go to Bethel? I'm going to show you why you go to Bethel. Go to page 853. I've got two scriptures I want you to take a look at. It's Luke chapter 17. And this is what Jesus has to tell you. In Luke chapter 17, in verse 21, Jesus says they're going to say it's here, they're going to say it's there. Forget it. The kingdom of God is within you. Wow! Give him a hand. Shout, jump up and down. You don't have to go to church. You don't have to send any money to anybody. You don't have to listen to evangelists on television anymore. It's inside of you. And do you know why they don't want you to know that? Because once you discover that power of God within you, what do you need them for? And the thing is, you don't need them. You need that holy natural power which is within you. Because you're unique. Every one of you is unique. Every one of you is different. Every one of you has a different personality. Every single one of you should never be changed. I don't care whether you're 16 or 88 or in between. You should be just what you are. But you know what you do when you go to religion? They try to get you all to be the same. Everybody stand up. Everybody sit down. Everybody kneel down. Everybody do this. Everybody stand up. Everybody say this. Everybody together. Bum, bum, bum. Say this. Say that. Say that. Don't say it. And then I found myself wandering out the back door. Because I will not ask anybody, and I do not listen to people telling me what I'm supposed to say, or what I'm supposed to think, or what I'm supposed to do. See, there's 10,000 penguins. There's a great commercial, and we got to get it. Joni, you got it. It's your job. You got to get that commercial. We're going to use it for the 10,000 penguins coming like this to a cliff, and they all jump over the cliff. One penguin says, "Ah!" That's my kind of guy. That's my kind of guy. Now I want to talk to you about, for a minute, what Jacob found. You go to Bethel. The kingdom of God is within you. Why don't you take your finger? Don't be afraid to do it. Do it, please. I don't do anything unclean or other. Take your finger. Put it right here. Okay? You know what that is? Temple. Okay. Temple, right? Okay, go with me to page 895. And I want you to look at the book of Acts. Page 895 in the book of Acts. And I want you to look at Acts chapter 7. And I want you to remember this. Acts chapter 7, and look at verse 48. The Most High dwells not in temples made with hands. You have the only temples in the world that are not made with hands. That's where he dwells. And you know what the Most High is? The Most High is the Most High frequency. The Most High frequency. And you're operating in many instances on a very low frequency. I've told people, if you want to see Larry King, you have to get a television that goes to that frequency. You cannot see him on a frequency of channel 2 to 13. Most people are operating on channel 2 to 13. You've got to get up to a higher frequency. And the only way you get to that higher frequency is in meditation. You raise the frequency. And then when you get on that frequency, suddenly it's just like seeing CNN or HBO or whatever. You can see things that you never could see before. Because now you're connected to the cosmic cable. And so this Most High dwells in a place not made with human hands. Go to Genesis chapter 35, back on page 30, okay? Page 30. Genesis chapter 35. Is it getting hot in here?
I'm in the front row.
The Martians say yes and the Venusians say no. Well, if it is, you know what to do. Genesis chapter, turn the air conditioner on. It doesn't really. Genesis chapter 35. Look at verse 1. And God said to Jacob, arise, go to Bethel, make an altar to the God that appeared unto you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother. Do you know? Jacob is the right side. The potential of being the spirit. Esau is his brother, the physical. Both of them are good. But in order for the spirit to be set free, it had to leave. It had to run. It had to separate itself from the physical. And it says, the God that appeared to you when you fled from your brother. Your brother is the left hemisphere of the brain. You have to move away from your brother. And then you will see that this is that God which is talked about by Jacob, who says, I'll call the place Pineal. Go and make an altar means spend time up there. Sacrifice means sacrifice your thoughts. Give everything up. Spend time here at this place. Take no thought. Jesus said, practice the single eye. These are those things where you move to the presence of that which we call God when we flee from the brother or flee from the left side. I have seen God face to face. I'll call the name of the place Pineal. Now here's a statement from Jacob to each one of you. Comes from 4,000 years ago. It's in Genesis chapter 35 on page 30. And it's in verse 2. And Jacob said to his household, put away the strange gods that are among you and be clean and change your garments. Put away. What you got to do? All of those I get in more trouble with this than anything else. All of those traditional things that were so important to you, take them and flush them. All of those things that came to you to be, I've got to be baptized. I've got to have hands laid on. I've got to do this. I've got to say this. I've got to believe that. You've got to flush all of it away, and you've got to start like somebody with no clothes on, with an inner tube around you, and jump into the river of life and let it take you where it will. All of these things which are so important to you, all of these things which you have been born with through religion, all of these things which you have been born with through your traditions, through your nationality, through your patriotism, all of these things you've got to let go, because you've got to become a child of the universe. You've got to reach out and you've got to take a hand of every living thing that breathes all over the world in a oneness in this nirvanic place of meditation, and all become one as Christ prayed. You've got to let go of all of these prejudices. You've got to let go of all of these feelings of we're the best, our country, and all of this. God bless America. You got to change God bless America to God bless the universe. It's got to be a universal understanding that you've got to have with nature inside of you exploding. So it says, put away all of these strange. Oh, you say, well, you know, all of these people, these religious people, they're doing it right. Want me to show you something going to shock your socks off? If you're wearing socks, and Ethel, you're not wearing socks out there. Go to page 979. I want to show you something. When it seems to be strange, go to page 979. You're in Hebrews chapter 6. And look what it says in Hebrews chapter 6. What does the Apostle Paul said? Leaving the principles of the doctrine of Christ, let us go on to perfection. Not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works. Not laying again the foundation of faith towards God. You know why you have to have faith in God? Because you're not sure. That's the only reason you have to have faith, is when you're not sure. What, how, you all got shoes on? You sure your foot's in your shoe? You don't have to have faith it is. Oh, I've got faith it is. I'm not sure, but I think so. I got, yeah, it's that. No, you don't, because why? You can feel it. It's a part of you. It moves inside of you. It is you. And so you don't have to have faith. And look what Paul says. Get rid of the doctrines of baptisms. Isn't it great? You don't have to believe that you're going to turn some God on in some planet because you stuck your head in water. I often wondered. This guy turns on. He's got some kind of fetish. He gets turned on if you stick your head in water. Why is that? Does that make sense to you? All the miserable things, but he's going to say, hey, Jody, I used to really not like you, but now that your hair's all wet, you're all right. I'm with you. Now you can come on into heaven. You got your head wet. With me. Quick. Do you know what the metaphysical understand? This is, Christianity is a Greek religion, and this is all Greek. And there are 5 stages of consciousness in Greek. And the first stage is earth. The second stage is water. The third stage is air. The fourth is fire. And the fifth is the new mind.
And that's why you have to be baptized. You have to take the lower mind. You have to put it into the truth, which is water, which is the second stage of consciousness, which you will then rise up into the air, which is the third stage of consciousness, which is nirvana, where there is no thought. And then you will hit that, which is the fourth stage, which is fire, which is spirit, and your mind will be renewed. That's baptism. It has nothing to do with real water. That's why Paul said, stop baptizing. Stop sticking people's heads in water. They actually think something's happening. Nothing's happening. Their head's getting wet. They're getting the flu. They're getting cold. All of these things. Do you realize? I mean, it's bad enough today. You realize in these places, probably the rivers were cleaner then. But they're sticking their head in water. Everybody's getting sick. They're snorting and snotting and sniffing and coughing and all that. I'm saved, but I'm saved. But I'm saved. Glory to God. Nothing like a little baptism and some penicillin to get me through this. There it is. That's why it says you arise to meet Jesus in the air, because air is the third stage of consciousness where there is no thought. And so this is where Jacob is told he's got to be raised up. See, to be clean, to be separated. Come on. It's not that bad. Not that bad. It's getting better. It's getting better. Now, in Genesis chapter 35:3, it talks about, and that's on page 30, Genesis chapter 35:3. Okay. Page 30, real quick. It says, and let us arise and go to Bethel, and I will make an altar unto you, who answered me in the day of my distress and was with me in the way. In the way. That's what the way is, that place of meditation where Jesus says the way is narrow and few there be who find it. In Acts 9:2 it says that Saul sought the Lord and saw his face in the way. The Lord appeared in the way. And that is an interesting point, because it's the metaphysical point that the only place you'll find this is in that strange place called the way. So when you are in the way, you're in the high place of spiritual consciousness. So in the story, it says that Jacob started to move out. They started to move towards this place near Bethel. I'm going to show you a few things that are really interesting. We're getting to the point of something that's really beautiful. Very, very beautiful. I want you to be very quiet when you listen to it. And I want you to hear it. I want it to get deep into you. But it says in Genesis 35:5, right where you are, they journeyed and the terror of God was upon the cities which were around them, but they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. The cities mean the mind. You see what it says? When you have reached this point where you've activated the pineal gland in the brain, the terror, the fear that comes down upon the mind is not allowed to touch you. You'll still be shaken. You'll still not understand. You'll still have to deal with these things, but you'll know there is a place. You'll know there is a way. You'll know there is an altar within you. You know there is a temple within you. And you know that when you sit in the silence of meditation, this thing has to come out right. The terror will be gone from you. And if the terror has not been gone for you, it's because you haven't been sitting there. You haven't been spending time there. Now, the beautiful part is this. Jacob, that part of you has arrived at that point where you know where the truth is, you know where God is, you know where enlightenment is, you know that place, you know where the temple is. And it says then in Genesis 35 and verse 8, Deborah died. This is very important. Deborah died. You know what Deborah means? Bee. You know why the bee is very important in mysticism? Because it makes honey. And honey is spiritual food. I will take you to a land flowing with milk and honey. But you know what? There is no longer any need for the bee. The bee died. You know what you're going to find out before you leave here today? You're going to find out in the story of Joseph and the coat of colors. When you reach that point of consciousness, there is no longer need for spirit. Why? Because the child is born. Now you will nurture the child. Spirit is only necessary to take you to the holy place. Once you've arrived there, you don't need it anymore. The bee dies. The bee dies. You know that? I want to say just honey, milk and honey. When you bring that energy upward and you're renewed physically, there is a place in the brain called colostrum. And it sends the oil down, and when it touches the pituitary gland, it secretes a milky white substance. When it touches the pineal gland, the gland secretes a golden yellow substance. It's like milk and honey. And the ancients said, we will bring you to a land flowing with milk and honey. It is the renewed through the glandular system. That's what this whole thing is, of the pituitary and the pineal gland of the brain. Incidentally, colostrum is also when a mother breastfeeds her baby, the milk is called colostrum. And the ancients knew that the oil in the milk was the gift of life that came into the body. They called it the holy colostrum. It became the saint colostrum. Then it became the holy Claus, the Saint Claus. You know it as Santa Claus bringing gifts from the North Pole, coming down the chimney with the gift of life. And it's true. That's the funny thing. Isn't it neat? So the bee dies, Deborah dies. There is no longer any need, and the Bible is going to reinforce that now. There is no longer any need for spirit because the child is born, and now a special child is going to be born. God went up into that place, it says, and Jacob had seen that place. Jacob had understood that place. Jacob had understood, you understand that there is within you this energy of nature that you call God, that dwells in you, that moves in you. If you don't, just one last one here, page 946, 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 16. And look what it says in verse 16, you are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will dwell in them, I will walk in them, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. In you. When you go inside, you walk directly into the arms of God, and she and he take you hand by hand as children of this new age. Beautiful. Now, there is an altar set in Genesis 35:14 in which water is poured on, which is the truth and life. And then a very beautiful thing happens. There is no longer a need for the Spirit. One of the most beautiful, in the Bible, and I can share this with you another time, all the people who are to deliver the child of promise are either barren or virgin. In this particular case, it is Rachel. And Rachel gives birth to Joseph of the coat of many colors, in which the week after next we'll be starting to do that, a very exciting book of Joseph in the coat of many colors. And in Genesis 35, verse 16 to 21, we have the death of Rachel. And I want you to listen to this part very carefully. It's very short, but very beautiful, and it'll tell you something. Rachel is the spirit which delivers the child of promise. She has delivered one child, Joseph, who will be an administrator in your life. She is about to deliver another child, which will be the catalyst of your life. And this child will assume that place of the wounded, hurt child in your life to this which is the child of promise. In Genesis chapter 35, you there with me? And then we'll finish up here. Genesis chapter 35, verse 16. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way they came to Ephrath. Ephrath means fruitful. Fruitful. Okay? And they came to this place. And I want you to know that Rachel means you, not U-E-Y-O-U. Rachel means E-W-E, which is a female sheep, which is a spiritual thought. Okay? They come to this place, and it says in Genesis 35:16, and they journeyed there, and they came, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass when she was in hard labor that the midwife said, fear not, but you'll have this son. And it came to pass as her soul was departing, for she died. She died. Rachel died. The bee died. There was no longer need to make the spirit. Rachel died. The mother spirit's work is over. And she called this child what many of you will have to call the child. She called it Banani. She called this child Banani, son of my pain. And do you know what? Every single one of you that has had this child born within you has done so out of the travail of agony of one sort or another. Something in your life has been so brutal that you finally came to this point where this child was born. But it has been a child of pain. it has been a child of hurt, but the child was born of spirit. And now that the child is born within you, and you know where that child lays to be nurtured by you, there is no longer need for the bee. There is no longer need for Rachel. And Rachel dies. And then Jacob takes the child in his arms. And he said, I will rename this child. And I will call him Benjamin. And Benjamin means son of my right hand. Huh? The child is born. The desires of the right side. The desires of the spiritual side. Benjamin. As we go in the story of Joseph, you will find that it is Benjamin, the son of the right hand, who saves the 12 tribes, who are part of the 12 signs of the zodiac and 12 aspects of your mind. And Rachel, the beautiful spirit that gave birth to the son of promise, was buried, and guess where? Because another child will be born and Rachel will be there and her spirit will come alive. She was buried at a place called Bethlehem. Near a place called Bethlehem. The house of bread, the place of truth, the place of the divine mind. All of these stories are given. Next week, for instance, I'm doing one of the most probably bizarre occult stories that's ever in the Bible, of Judah, of the Spirit, who falls and then ascends to the mountain, and there in the darkness and wildness of the mountain confronts a prostitute, intercourses with that woman, and then the shock of who it is when her veil is removed. And all of these stories are given thousands of years ago to tell you, come on, raise yourself up, come on. Stop standing on your own desires. Come on. Come into yourself. Be patient. Wait. You can't dig into the ground and get oil today. Let it drill. Let it dig deeper and deeper until it hits. But come on. And then once you come, understand, you can get rid of all this spiritual stuff. You don't need it anymore. The bee's dead. Rachel's dead. But the child is alive. Come on and nurture the child. Come on and hold the child. Come on and lift the child. Tell God that you understand what he's telling you. Because what he's telling you is all of this takes place within you. And all he's ever asked you to do is sit still, be quiet, give him that 10%, which is the left side. And he has promised through Krishna and Buddha and Muhammad and Jesus and every other prophet, he has promised that he will show you a way, he will make you a way, he will lift you above all of these trials and tribulations, and he'll always be there. And each time then as you walk into that temple, as you open the door, you won't see a big God sitting on a throne with a long beard. You'll see a little child. And you'll take the little child, and the child will speak to you. One of the most thrilling, shaking things I've ever heard was I remember reading a story about a remote Buddhist monastery in Tibet, where a reporter who did not believe these things saw with his mind and his eyes. They took a little child, and they placed a little child by the altar of this Tibetan temple, and they sat in silence, and the child spoke. The infant spoke. What was this? A manifestation of the infant who is waiting to speak inside of you. The child who has been wounded is now ready to give way to the child of promise. Joseph, Jesus, Benjamin, call it what you will. It is within you. And it is waiting now to take you and bring you into a new understanding, an alliance and a universal knowledge of nature. And once you find that, then you will be a child of this new age. And I'm not talking about the New Age movement, because a lot of that is as funky as the Old Age movement. I'm talking about that which is the movement to the bosom of God and nature, the universe. She's waiting for you. He's waiting for you. And we as children of the New Age must reach out to them. Thank you very much.